Here's 5.3, day 1, part 2. We're going to continue factoring by grouping. This is when you have 4 terms. So I'm going to group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. So I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite my equation. And now I'm going to group the first 2 and the last 2. Now we're going to pull out the GCF of each group. So I look at the first group, 8x to the 5th minus 6x squared. What can I divide out of that parentheses? What is my GCF? Well, I can divide by 2. I can also take out an x squared because they both have an x squared in common. So now what am I left with? 8 divided by 2 is 4. X to the 5th divided by x squared, so I'm taking 2 x's out. I'm left with 3 left. Now let's go to the next term. 6 divided by 2 is 3. X squared divided by x squared, I'm taking 2 x's out, and I have 2 x's, so that is now gone. All right, let's go over to the next parentheses. The GCF of this group is 3. So I'm going to divide both terms by 3. So I take 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then x cubed is still left. Now let's go to the next term. Negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3. Look what happens again. The 2 parentheses match up. 4x cubed minus 3, 4x cubed minus 3. This is your GCF again. So now I'm going to pull out the GCF, which is the parentheses. And now what am I left with? I call these my leftovers. I'm going to take the 4x cubed minus 3 out of the first group. So now I'm left with that 2x squared. Go over to the second group. I'm going to take out the 4x cubed minus 3. I'm left with the plus 3. It is now factored. Here's our last method. Our last method is factoring by the difference of 2 squareds. I do want you to write these examples down and this rule. When you have 2 terms, and these 2 terms are both squared, and there's a subtraction sign between them, you can quickly factor them as a minus b and then a plus b. All right, I have some examples for us to do. So go ahead and write your first example down. X squared minus 81. And we want to factor this equation. I've done the first step for you on the slide. We want to rewrite the 2 terms as perfect squares. So x times x is x squared. And then 9 times 9 is 81. So what's going to happen is this is going to be your A, that is going to be your B in this rule. So now I can go ahead and break it up. It's going to be my A, x, and x, and then my b, my 9 and my 9, And then what goes in the middle is plus, minus, or minus, plus. It doesn't matter the order of those two. Now it is completely factored. Let's go on to the second example. Let's just have you follow along with this one. No need to write. So now we have y squared minus 16. I've done the first step for you again. We're going to split up that y squared into y times y, and then the 16 into a perfect. 4 times 4 is 16. So this is going to be the a in my rule. That is going to be my b in my rule. So what is going to go in the first term? A y and a y. And then my second terms are going to be my 4 and my 4, and then just minus and plus. It's completely factored. Next example, again, don't need to write this down, just follow along. A little bit more challenging now because now we have a 9y squared. So we're going to rewrite that 9 as a perfect, 3 times 3. And then the y times y. So this will be my a. Now rewrite the 25 as a perfect. 5 times 5 is 25. Now we're set to split it up. So I have 3y and 3y. That's my first term. And then I have my 5 and my 5. And then what goes in between is minus and plus. The next example, I do want you to follow along and write down. 16x squared minus 81 to the fourth. What is the perfect square for 16? What are two numbers that multiply together, the same number, that give us 16? 4 times 4 is 16. And then x times x is x squared. So think back again. 4x times 4x is 16x squared.
Language, ma'am.
Well, you need And then 81y to the fourth. How can I rewrite 81? Well, what two numbers multiply to 81? 9 times 9. We also have a y to the fourth. So what two numbers multiply together to give me y to the fourth? Well, that is y squared and y squared. So now I can go ahead and factor that. So in my first term, it's going to be 4x and 4x. What's going to be in the second term? (9y squared, 9y squared), and then minus and plus. All right, next example, go ahead and write that down. When I typed it up, looks like it messed up a little bit, so I'm just going to rewrite it for you. It should say negative x squared plus 4. And I have a little hint down there. Take out the negative first. Because right now it's not a term squared minus a term squared. So let's pull out the negative first. So what will happen when I pull out that negative? I'm left with x squared and then minus 4. It changes the signs inside of that parentheses. Now I'm set to factor in that parentheses. So you try to figure out what's going to go in that parentheses. All right, what is the perfect square of x squared? That's x and What is the perfect square of 4? 2 and 2. And then what goes in the middle again is your opposite sides minus some plus. Here's what we'll be working on tomorrow in class. I'll be passing out a green factoring worksheet. You don't need to write this down if you don't want to. We will be working on them in class. We're going to do part A on the worksheet, 1 through 19 odd. And I gave you the hint, we're just going to use the GCF method. Part B, 23 through 35 odd. We'll be using GCF and or grouping. And then part C focuses on the difference of two squares.